Hi, in this video we're going to be going over the key sources of law in Massachusetts. A couple of points before we get started. One of the main points I wanted to make is that in Massachusetts, for at least the key sources of law, we're going to be able to draw parallels to the federal system. So that might be helpful when you're thinking about the sources of law or doing legal research. Another caveat I want to make in the beginning is that I'm only going to be going over the basic sources of law in this video and giving you some brief information as we're going to be going over all of these sources of law in more detail and some additional sources I'm not covering in the weeks to come. Okay, so let's get started. So this is a very basic diagram of the Massachusetts government. Just like in the federal system, our Constitution provides for three branches of government. We have the legislature, which is, funnily enough, in Massachusetts called the Massachusetts General Court, so don't get distracted by that. That's our legislature. We have the executive branch headed by our governor, and we have executive agencies or administrative agencies, just like we do at the federal level. And we have the Massachusetts court systems. Those are our three basic branches. So what is the source of law that the legislature puts out? You're probably familiar with this already. They promulgate laws called public laws, private laws. Sometimes they're called acts, resolves, statutes. They go by a whole bunch of different names. In Massachusetts, the two main sources that we're looking at are the general laws of Massachusetts, which is our official compilation of all of the general laws currently in effect that are applicable to everyone, basically. And when you look on Lexis or Westlaw, you might notice this has a different name because those are the unofficial editions. And the second source I have for you here, called the Acts and Resolves of Massachusetts, is the chronological arrangement of the laws as they're passed by the legislature in Massachusetts. So the equivalent to that would be the bound set of the session laws at the federal level is the statutes at large. So at the executive branch, we have a lot of different sources at the executive branch, just as we have lots of different agencies. But our main source that we're going to be looking at is the Code of Massachusetts Regulation. And the regulations here, they're set up in a large set. It's this top picture. And they're the regulations promulgated by the different agencies in Massachusetts that are currently in effect. So just like at the federal level, we also have another publication which gives notices of proposed regulations and updates regulations. So the two main sources for regulations that we're going to be looking at in Massachusetts are the Code of Massachusetts Regulations. That's the most important one. It's the ones for the regulations in current effect. And then our other tool that we're going to look at in more detail in the weeks to come, in week 7 actually, is the Massachusetts Register. And so that would be the equivalent of the Federal Register. Some other sources of law we have at the executive branch are adjudicatory decisions. So some of the agencies in Massachusetts, like the one I'm showing you here, the Massachusetts Department of Labor Relations, issue decisions on matters. And then we also have our head executive officer, our governor, issues orders or proclamations. So this is executive order number, sorry, the picture's not so great. I think it's number 500, and it has to do with the composition of our nominating committee for judges in Massachusetts and the Code of Judicial Conduct. So things like that are the type of things, and there's lots of other things that the governor could issue an executive order on. It's another source of law that you might be looking for at the executive level. So at the court level, I didn't have a lot of great pictures, but we do, of course, have decisions by our courts, our two most important being our appeals court level courts, our Supreme Judicial Court. The official reporter for those is called the Massachusetts Reports. There's also an unofficial version. And then our intermediate level appellate court, the Massachusetts Appeals Court, also has a reporter, the Massachusetts Appeals Court Reports. One thing that's a little bit different at the state level is that the trial court decisions might be a little bit more difficult to find depending on which court. So at the federal level, we have trial court decisions are published in the federal supplement, but at the state level, we have some availability in print and some online availability, so that's something we'll definitely be spending some more time on. Okay, so the key takeaways from this slideshow: the Massachusetts government structure, it's going to be really similar to the federal government. And why is that important? Well, it's important because we can use a similar research approach for many research projects. The one thing to keep in mind, though, is that the different Massachusetts sources are going to have different names, of course. And one other thing I wanted to point out for this slideshow is I'm giving you the official sources. So when you're looking at the sources on Lexis or Westlaw, you might notice things have a different name. That's because some of the sources are also published in an unofficial source, just like the federal sources, right? All right, so if you have any questions, you can use the question and answer form on Blackboard. You could send us a quick email, or if it's something just of a general nature, you can include that in your weekly journal entry.